Alrighty then, here's our lesson on area of a triangle. So get your learning target, both the standard and its description, as well as your can statement filled in. So our goal today is I can calculate the area of a triangle and find one of its missing measurements. So we're going to jump right into our notes. Start by putting in our definition for our formula up here. To find the area of a triangle, we're going to have 1/2 the product of the base and the height. So similar to parallelograms, remember product is code for multiply. You're going to multiply the base and height together, but then we only want half of it. And we're going to talk about in just a minute why we only want half of the area. In a formula form, we actually have two ways of writing it out. We can do 1/2 base times height, multiplying base and height and then finding half of it, or depending on the problem, finding half of something is the same thing as just dividing it by 2. So you could also think of it as base times height divided by 2. But that's going to be our formula for today. So let's take a look at our example down here. First thing we need to do is find our base and our height. Remember from our lesson on parallelograms, the height and the base always have to meet at a right angle. So sometimes it's going to be two sides of your triangle. Sometimes the height is not actually going to be one of the sides. We're going to have to go find that measurement, and we'll talk about that as it comes up. But again, always look for that right angle. So they tell me my base is this flat edge right here. So again, to count it, we go from corner to corner. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 units long. Remember, you're not looking at how full are the boxes, the squares, we're just looking at the edge itself. Your height goes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 units high. So we have a base of 5, a height of 8. Now our formula says to find the area, we're going to do base times height divided by 2. Here's why we're going to divide by 2. Imagine if I were to go ahead and finish this out to make it a rectangle. We know to find the area of a rectangle, it's base times height. 5 times 8. That means this whole rectangle has an area of 40 square units. But clearly we don't want that whole rectangle. We only want this part of it that makes up our triangle. Our triangle makes up half of the whole rectangle. So base times height is the area of the whole rectangle. We want half of it because we just want the triangle part. That's why we always divide by 2. Because we're really finding half of this bigger rectangle that's around it. So let's go ahead and plug in our numbers. My base is 5. My height is 8, and then divide by 2. 5 times 8 is 40, divided by 2 gives me an area of 20. But remember from our parallelograms, don't leave your answer naked. Don't give me just a plain old number because I don't know what it represents. In this case, they didn't tell me the units, so I just used the generic term units squared because it's how many squares could I fit inside of this shape. Area is filling up our shape. So let's try a couple more. Remember our formula is area is equal to base times height divided by 2 or base times height times 1/2 if there's fractions involved. So first thing we have to do is figure out what is our base and our height. Well, our base, a good place to start is the flat bottom edge. Counting it, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 units long. And here's where you got to be careful. Your height. Remember, your height has to meet at a right angle to your base. And basically, it's a measurement from your base straight up to the farthest point or the farthest edge of your triangle. So basically, I want to go straight up from the base all the way up to this opposite point. Notice that right angle symbol. That's what you want to look for your height. This one is 1, 2, 3, 4 units high. So a good way to think about this is, I like to think of it as, what would the rectangle itself be? That helps to remind me that I have to divide by 2 because I only want the triangle. So this rectangle has a base of 5, a height of 4. So we know its area is going to be 20. Clearly our triangle is not as big as this larger rectangle, so we know it shouldn't have the same area. That's why we're going to divide by 2, because we don't want the whole thing, we just want half of it, the part that makes up our triangle. So remember to show your work. You do have to write out what are you multiplying and dividing by. Don't just jump to an answer, you won't get credit for it. I need to see how you got your way there. 5 times 4 is 20, divided by 2 gives me 10. Don't forget your units. In this case, it's 10 units squared. Area is always squared. Here's the next one. This time I get to use the measurements on my triangle. It has a base of 2, a height of 5, because notice they meet at a right angle. So I'm going to do base times height, 2 times 5, but then I'm going to divide by 2, because if I just did 2 times 5, I would be finding this big rectangle. I don't want the area of the whole rectangle. I want half of it. I just want my triangle piece. So that's why we always divide by 2 when we find the area of a triangle. Because we don't want the whole rectangle, we just want the half that makes up our triangle. 2 times 5 is 10, divided by 2 is 5. In this case, we're dealing with feet, so feet squared. Or if you write it out in words, 5 square feet. Last one, fractions. Doesn't matter, we can handle it. It's just a fraction problem is all. But the same idea, base times height. But since we're dealing with fractions, let's leave it as the 1/2 instead of dividing by 2. So we need to find our base and our height. Remember, our base is going to be one edge of our triangle. Our height is going to be at a right angle to that base. So in this case, it's not actually the bottom. Here is my base. If you're not sure, rotate your piece of paper. Flip it around until 3.5 is the flat bottom edge of your triangle. That's your base, which means 6.5 is your height. Because notice it meets at a right angle. Okay? Not every problem is only going to have the base and height there. You're going to have to be able to figure out which ones to use. So plugging in my numbers, I'm going to do 1/2 times 3 and 1/2 times 6 and 1/2. Remember, to multiply fractions, you have to make them into improper fractions. Can't leave them as mixed numbers. So it becomes 1/2 times 3 times 2 is 6, plus 1 is 7/2. 6 times 2 is 12, plus 1 is 13/2. And then we multiply. Multiply our numerators, multiply our denominators, simplify. 1 times 7 is 7. 7 times 3 is 91. Or sorry, 7 times 13 is 91. 2 times 2 is 4. Times 2 is 8. Now, improper fraction. Got to change it back into a mixed number. But notice we don't need to divide by 2 because we already multiplied times 1/2. That does the same thing. 8 goes into 91 11 times. That's 88, which leaves us with 3 left over. So I get 11 3/8 feet squared. So you're going to have to remember your rules for your fractions, but you can handle it. Last part. This time, just like our parallelograms, we know the area, we're missing one of our measurements. So we have to work backwards. The key is start with your formula. Area is equal to base times height divided by 2. Plug in what you know. In this case, I know my area is 42. My base is 14. I don't know my height, but then I have to divide by 2. So think of it kind of like an equation, just like we got done solving this last minute. First off, do the math you can do. I can do 14 divided by 2. 14 divided by 2 gives me 7. Basically, I'm simplifying that side. So it's still 7 times h is equal to 42. That's just an equation that we can solve. What did they do to h? Well, they multiplied by 7. So I'm going to divide by 7. But I'm going to do the same thing on both sides of my equation. 42 divided by 7 gives me 6 is equal to h. So I just solved a multiplication equation is all. So my area, or sorry, this one should say my height is 6 meters. Since we're dealing in meters, we're going to keep it as meters. So let's try the next one. Area is equal to base times height divided by 2. Plug in what you know. In this case, I know the area is 24. My height is 12, but I don't know my base, so it's going to stay there. Do the math you can do. I can do 12 divided by 2. So I get 24 is equal to base times 6. 12 divided by 2 simplifies to be 6. Now I solve it. What did they do to b? Well, they multiply by 6, so I'm going to do the opposite. I'm going to divide by 6. 24 divided by 6 gives me 4 is equal to b. So my base is 4 inches. Plug in what you know, work backwards, figure out what do I need to find. So one more here. My base is 15, my area is 37.5. So again, work with what you know. Base times height divided by 2. My area is 37.5. My base is 15. I don't know my height, so I leave it there. Divided by 2. Do the math you can. 15 divided by 2 is 7.5 times my height is equal to 37.5. If you weren't sure what 15 divided by 2 is, just do a little division problem off to the side. Here it's 7.5 times h. So to solve it, I'm going to do the opposite. I'm going to divide by 7.5. So my height is equal to 37.5 divided by 7.5. If you're not sure, you can do a little division problem off to the side. 37.5 divided by 7.5. But in this case, I know what this answer is. It goes in 5 times. So my height is 5 meters. All you're doing is just working the problem backwards. You're kind of undoing the work that you've done in the problem. Plug in what you know, work backwards to find what you're missing.